Hey guys, tonight we're going to step back in time, not to a grand palace or a pivotal battle, but onto the grimy, splintered deck of a pirate ship during the golden age of piracy. And we're not talking about the buckling adventures or the chests overflowing with gold. No, we're talking about dinner. And trust me, if you were to actually join a pirate crew in the early 1700 seconds, the food alone might make you wish for the gallows. You'd be lucky to last the first month without your teeth falling out. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, maybe drop a comment and let me know what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where our little history community is tuning in from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The salt spray feels good on your face, a welcome relief from the stench of the crowded port you just left behind. Maybe it was Nassau, maybe Tortuga. It doesn't matter. The names blend together into a haze of cheap rum, sweat, and desperation. You're finally here. You've signed the articles, sworn an oath to the skull and crossbones, and joined a brotherhood of outcasts. You're officially a pirate. The romantic tales whispered in taverns echo in your mind a life of absolute freedom, of untold riches, of being a master of your own destiny on the high seas. You look at the horizon, a perfect line of shimmering blue, and a genuine smile spreads across your face for the first time in months. You're escaping a life of backbreaking labor, or perhaps the brutal discipline of the Royal Navy, where the cut in nine tails was a more frequent companion than a decent meal. Here, they told you, every man is equal. Every man is equal. The ship itself is smaller than you imagined. It's not a majestic galleon like in the stories, but a cramped, functional sloop or brigantine that smells faintly of bilge water, tar, and something vaguely like old cheese. The men are a rough-looking lot, a collection of scars, missing teeth, and sun-scorched skin from every corner of the Atlantic. But there's a strange energy here, a chaotic camaraderie. Someone shoves a tin cup of watered-down rum into your hand, and the fiery liquid burns a welcome trail down your throat. This is it. This is the life. For a few blissful hours, as the ship cuts through the waves and the familiar shoreline disappears, you believe you've made the best decision of your life. Then, you hear a gruff shout from the ship's cook. Grubs up. A ripple of not exactly excitement, more like resigned acceptance, moves through the crew. You follow the others to the galley, which is little more than a smoky closet with a brick-lined firebox. The man dishing out the food is old, with a wooden leg and a perpetually sour expression. He wasn't hired for his culinary skills. In the world of piracy, the cook was often a man who had been injured in a previous battle, losing a leg or an arm, and could no longer perform the demanding duties of climbing the rigging or fighting. Cooking was seen as a less strenuous, safer job, reserved for the disabled. HES, not a chef, HES a survivor, charged with the grim task of making inedible things last as long as possible. He slops something into the wooden bowl you're holding out. You look down. There are two items. The first is a chunk of what you assume is meat. It's a dark, grayish-purple color and glistens with a thick layer of greasy salt. The second is a flat, off-white, perfectly square biscuit. It looks dense, unforgiving. This, you learn, is your welcome feast. This is the foundation of your new diet. You find a spot on the deck, wedged between a coil of rope and a cannon. You watch the veteran pirates. They don't seem to be enjoying their meal, but they are consuming it with a grim efficiency. You decide to start with the biscuit. It seems safer. You lift it to your mouth and bite down. Or rather, you try to bite down. The sound is less a crunch and more a dull, painful thud as your teeth meet a surface with the consistency of petrified wood. A jolt of pain shoots through your jaw, gnawing at a corner, and manage to break off a small, gritty piece. It has no flavor. None. It's like chewing on chalk and sand. This you've just been introduced to is hardtack, the notorious ship's biscuit, the bedrock of any sailor's diet for centuries. You abandon the biscuit for a moment and turn your attention to the meat. You spear a piece with your knife and bring it to your lips. The smell hits you first, an overpowering salty, slightly rancid odor. You force yourself to take a bite. It's tough, stringy, and the saltness is so intense it makes your tongue tingle and your eyes water. This is salted beef, preserved in barrels of brine for months, maybe even years. The preservation process has obliterated any semblance of what it once was. As you sit there, struggling to chew your first meal as a free man, the romantic vision of pirate life begins to flicker and fade. The idea of a merry life and a short one was a popular pirate saying, but historians are still debating just how much of this was a self-created myth to attract recruits, and how much was a grim acceptance of reality. Was it truly a joyous, albeit brief, existence, or was it just short looking down at the rock-hard bread and the salty, half-rotten meat in your bowl? You start to suspect it's the latter. The gold coins and buried treasure suddenly feel very, very far away. The most immediate treasure you can imagine right now is a loaf of soft bread and a glass of clean water. And a sinking feeling settles in your stomach. This is what you'll be eating tomorrow, and the day after that, and for every day to come. You stare at the biscuit in your hand, a perfect square of pale, compressed flour. Your jaw still aches from that first, ambitious attempt. An older pirate sitting nearby, a man with a weathered face and a startlingly bright blue bandana, catches your eye. He lets out a low chuckle, a gravelly sound that seems to come from deep in his chest. He doesn't say a word. Instead, he takes his own biscuit, holds it over his tin cup, and with a swift, practiced motion, smashes it against the lip of the cup with the butt of his knife. The biscuit doesn't shatter, it grudgingly breaks into a few large, jagged pieces. He then drops these pieces into his cup, which is filled with the same watered-down grog you were given earlier. He gives the cup a swirl and then sets it aside, turning his attention to the stringy, salty meat. You understand. It's not a food, it's an ingredient, a component that requires rehydration. You look at your own cup. The rum inside is precious. Wasting it on softening this thing feels worse. Waking a tooth feels worse. You mimic the old sailor, finding the whole process surprisingly difficult. Your first strike with the knife barely chips a corner. You have to put some real force into it, a sharp, angry rap that finally cracks the biscuit in two. The pieces fall into your grog with a dull plop. You watch as they sink slowly, stubbornly resisting the liquid. Tiny air bubbles rise to the surface, as if the biscuit itself is begrudgingly exhaling its last gasp of dusty, bone-dry air. This is the infamous ship's biscuit or hardtack, a culinary marvel, if your only criteria for marvelous is longevity. You'll learn that it's made from a simple dough of flour, water, and sometimes a little salt, though the salt was often omitted on long voyages to save money. The key is the baking process. It's baked not once, not twice, but up to 4 times, until every last molecule of moisture has been mercilessly evicted. The result is a food product so devoid of water that it's almost inert, virtually immune to mold. It can last for years, which is precisely the point. On a ship where your next port of call is an uncertain dot on a map weeks or months away, food that doesn't spoil is more valuable than gold. You hear the men around you refer to it by other names, a litany of grimly affectionate nicknames: molar breakers, tooth-duller res, sheet iron, worm castles. A sailor from the Royal Navy, who deserted to join your crew, mutters that he once saw a captain use a biscuit as a paperweight for 3 months. Another story circulates about a court-martial where an officer was disciplined for throwing a biscuit at a subordinate, not because he threw something, but because he was misusing naval property that could have been eaten. The line between food and building material is alarmingly thin. Historians still debate the consistency of its production. Was every biscuit this indestructible, or were some batches, perhaps baked by a more compassionate soul, Slightly more forgiving, it's likely the quality varied wildly. A well-funded naval vessel might receive a higher-grade biscuit than a merchant ship, and a pirate crew, operating on a shoestring budget and whatever flour they could plunder, probably got the absolute dregs of the barrel. You suspect you're chewing on the bottom of that barrel right now. After a few minutes, you peer into your cup. The biscuit chunks have softened, but not into a pleasant, bread pudding-like consistency. They've dissolved into a thick, lumpy, grayish sludge at the bottom of your cup. It looks subtly unappetizing, but the old sailor next to you is now spooning his own sludge into his mouth with grim determination. You take a deep breath, dip your own spoon in, and try it. The texture is awfully gritty, pasty mush. The rum has done little to improve the flavor, only adding a boozy, sour note to the overwhelming taste of damp flour. It's a bit like eating wet cement mixed with cheap alcohol. Yet, you can swallow it. You don't have to risk your dental health with every bite. You look around at the crew, men feared across the 7 seas, all quietly, unmiserably spooning identical gray sludge into their mouths. And you realize this is a great equalizer. It doesn't matter if you're the captain or the newest recruit on this ship. At this moment, everyone is united by the shared misery of eating this stuff. It's a humbling, sobering ritual. This isn't a meal to be enjoyed, it's fuel to be consumed, the grim necessity and the harsh calculus of survival at sea. You manage to finish the sludge, the pasty coating clinging to the inside of your mouth. You've successfully eaten your first piece of hardtack. But as you set your bowl down, you can't shake the feeling that this simple, hard-as-rock biscuit holds more secrets, and you have a sinking suspicion that they are pleasant ones. A few days turn into a week. A routine has settled in, as bleak and monotonous as the endless expanse of the sea itself. The sun rises, you perform your duties swabbing the deck, mending sails, keeping watch, and then you eat. The ritual with the hardtack has become second nature. You don't even think about it anymore. You take the biscuit, give it a sharp crack against your cup, and let the resulting rubble steep in grog until it's a palatable, if an inspiring mush. You've accepted it. This is your life now. You've even started to feel a strange, hollow pride in your ability to stomach it. You're a hardened sailor, a pirate. You can eat what would make a lobbergag. You think you've mastered the art of the pirate diet. You are, of course, terribly wrong. One afternoon, the sea is unusually calm, and the sun is bright, casting sharp, unforgiving shadows across the deck. When the cook hands you your ration, you don't immediately break the biscuit. Perhaps you're feeling a bit rebellious, or maybe just bored. You decide to try gnawing on it dry again, just to see if your jaw has somehow toughened up in the last week. You hold the square of baked flour up, examining it in the bright sunlight. And that's when you see it. It's not a solid, uniform block. The surface is peppered with tiny, pinprick-sized holes, almost like a miniature ant farm viewed from the side. You trace your finger over them and find a network of tiny, intricate tunnels burrowing deep into the biscuit's interior. A fine, brownish dust, distinct from the white flour, coats your fingertip. You bring it closer to your eye, a knot of unease tightening in your stomach. Something is wrong. And then, from one of the tiny tunnel entrances, something emerges. It's small and black, a beetle no bigger than a grain of rice. It crawls slowly across the pale landscape of the biscuit before disappearing into another hole. You stare, frozen. A weevil, a pantry pest, but the horror is just beginning. As your eyes adjust, you start to see more. You see the source of the tunnels. Inside, nestled within the very substance of your food, are pale, soft-bodied things, and they are small, white, and segmented. And they are wriggling, larvae, tiny grubs feasting on the flour, living their entire life cycle inside your daily bread. The name you heard someone mutter now echoes in your mind with sickening clarity. Wormcastle. A wave of nausea washes over you. The sludge you've been dutifully spooning into your mouth for the past week, it wasn't just flour and drum. You've been eating this. Blindly ignorantly, you've been consuming dozens, maybe hundreds of these creatures every single day. You feel a desperate urge to retch over the side of the ship. You look up, your face a mask of pale disgust, expecting to see similar horror on the faces of your crewmates. You see nothing of the sort. The old sailor with the blue bandana is tapping his own biscuit on the railing. A few weevils and a small shower of dust fall out onto the deck. He calmly brushes them away with his thumb, then proceeds to break the biscuit for his grog, as if nothing happened. He catches your horrified stare and offers you that same gravelly chuckle. "Extra protein, lad," he says, his voice matter of fact. "Saves ye from wasting away. The ship's butchered on charge for M." Another pirate chimes in. "We call M ship's cattle." Makes the bread lighter, easier to break. You can't tell if he's joking. The disturbing thing is, he might be right. The tunneling activity of the weevils and their larvae does, in a way, erode the biscuit, making the dense, brick-like structure slightly more brittle and easier to break apart. This is a truly bizarre piece of sailor lore that historians confirm some sailors preferred the weevil white biscuits to the fresh ones precisely for this reason. A fresh, solid biscuit could genuinely break a man's tooth, while a lively one was pre-softened. In a manner of speaking, the question of how sailors truly felt about this is one of those things scholars still argue about. Was the extra protein line just a form of gallows humor? A dark joke to cope with the revolting reality, or did they, through sheer necessity and psychological conditioning, come to genuinely see it as a negligible, or even slightly beneficial addition to their meager diet on a ship where starvation was a constant, looming threat? Perhaps the revulsion towards eating insects was a luxury one simply couldn't afford. Any source of calories was a good source of calories. You look back down at the wriggling biscuit in your hand. Your stomach churns, but the gnawing hunger is still there. You have a choice: throw your only food for the next 12 hours overboard, or adapt. You watch the old sailor again. HES not looking at his food. HES looking out at the horizon, at the endless blue as he eats. And you understand, the secret is in not looking too closely. You take a deep, shaky breath, raise the biscuit high, and with a grunt of furious resignation, you smash it into pieces against your cup. You pour the grog in, stirring it vigorously, trying to obliterate the evidence. The sludge you're about to eat is no longer just unappetizing. It's grotesque. But you're pirates. And pirates, you're learning, do what they must to survive. The discovery of the ship's cattle has changed you. Eating is no longer just a bland, monotonous chore, it's a test of mental fortitude. Every meal is a battle between your roaring hunger and the crawling knowledge of what's really in your food. You try not to think about it. You try not to look. But now that you know, you can't not know. The sun is no longer your friend at meal times. Its bright, honest light is an accuser, revealing every tiny tunnel, every wriggling inhabitant of your daily bread. You find yourself seeking shadows, turning your back to the sun, trying to eat in the gloomiest corner of the deck you can find. It's an instinct, a primal urge to hide from the revolting truth. But soon you notice you're not the only one. This isn't just your private shame, it's a shared, unspoken strategy. As evening falls and the cook yells for the supper ration, you see a subtle shift in the crew's behavior. The men don't jostle for a spot in the last rays of the setting sun. Instead, they wait. They linger, talking in low murmurs, mending a bit of rope, sharpening a knife, until true darkness has fallen. Only when the deck is cloaked in the deep, forgiving black of a moonless night, do they collect their rations undeed. This is the ritual of the blind eat, a clever, collective delusion practiced by sailors for centuries. The logic is simple and profoundly human. What you can't see can't disgust you. In the dark, the biscuit is just a shape. The texture in your mouth is just texture. You can't see the weevils skittering away from your fingers. You can't see the pale larvae nestled in their furry crypts. You can tell yourself you're just eating bread. It's a psychological trick, a way to build a wall between your mind and your stomach. Tonight, you participate fully for the first time. The air is thick and humid, the only light coming from a single, swaying lantern by the main mast, casting long, dancing shadows that hide more than they reveal. You take your biscuit and your piece of salt pork. You find a spot near the bow, your back to the lantern, shrouded in almost complete darkness. You hold the biscuit in your hand. You can feel the familiar, gritty texture, the tiny holes. You know what's in there. You perform the second part of the ritual. A little trick you learned from watching one of the more fastidious pirates. You hold the biscuit over the deck and give it a firm, sharp tap against the railing. It's not hard enough to break it, just a solid jolt. In the near silence, you can hear a faint pattering sound on the wooden planks below. It's the sound of the adult beetles, the weevils being dislodged and falling to the deck. They are the more active residents, the ones you might feel crawling on your hand. The larvae, burrowed deep inside, are left behind. It's a small, almost pathetic act of defiance, a way of telling yourself you've cleaned it. Of course, you know the bulk of the infestation remains, but it's a comforting gesture. One historian noted this practice in his journals, calling it the sailor's tap, a common bit of dinner etiquette. You then break the biscuit, drop it in your grog, and eat the resulting sludge in the comforting anonymity of the night. It's still a gritty, pasty mess, but without the visual confirmation of its inhabitants, it's somehow more bearable. Your mind is free to wander. You can think about the stars above, the feel of the ship cutting through the water, the prospect of a rich prize ship just over the horizon. You can almost pretend you're eating something normal. This practice of eating in the dark is one of those fascinating historical details that reveals so much about the human psyche. It wasn't an official rule, not something written in the ship's articles. It was a piece of folk wisdom passed from one generation of sailors to the next. The extent to which this was a universal practice is, naturally, a subject of some debate among maritime historians. Some accounts describe it as an absolute necessity for all but the most iron-stomached veterans, while others barely mention it. It likely depended on the crew, the captain, and just how badly infested the particular batch of biscuits was. On your ship, it seems to be the unspoken law. As you finish your grim meal, you feel a strange sense of belonging. You have learned the secret handshake of survival. You have tapped your biscuit. You have eaten in the dark. You are no longer the wide-eyed greenhorn who gagged at his first meal. You are part of the crew, a participant in its bizarre and necessary rituals. But as you stare out into the blackness, a new thought creeps into your mind. You found a way to cope with the bread. But what about the meat, the heart? Greasy, unnaturally salty chunk of purple stuff that still sits in your bowl. You've been forcing it down, but you haven't really thought about it. Where does it come from? Why is it so awful? The darkness, you suspect, hides secrets about more than just the biscuits. Having made a fragile peace with the biscuit situation, you now turn your full, apprehensive attention to the other staple on your wooden plate, the meat. At first glance, it's a mystery wrapped in a greasy enigma. It's served in fibrous, brick-sized chunks that have been hacked from a larger mass, displaying a disconcerting range of colors from a brownish purple to a sickly gray. It's hard to the touch, and when you cut into it, your knife meets a tough, stringy resistance, as if you're trying to saw through a coil of old rope. The smell alone is a challenge and aggressive. Eye-watering saltiness mixed with a faint, underlying soreness, the smell of something that has been dead for a very, very long time. You watch the other pirates attack their portions. They don't savor it. They use their knives to saw off small, tough slivers and chew them for an unnerving long time, their jaws working with the slow, grinding motion of a cow chewing its cud. You follow suit. The first sensation that hits your tongue is salt. Not just a little seasoning, but an overwhelming chemical-grade blast of pure sodium chloride. It's so intense that it numbs your taste buds to any other potential flavor the meat might have once possessed. It's a saltness that feels like it's actively drawing all the moisture out of your mouth, leaving your tongue feeling thick and dry. This is your introduction to salt pork or salt beef, the protein cornerstone of the age of sail. The concept is simple. In an era before refrigeration, the only way to keep meat from rotting on a long voyage was to preserve it, and the most effective preservative available was salt. The process was brutal. Huge quantities of meat, usually the cheapest, toughest cuts of beef and pork, were chopped up and layered in massive wooden barrels with equally massive quantities of coarse salt. A brine, a super concentrated saltwater solution, was then poured over the top to fill any remaining gaps. The barrels were sealed and stored deep in the ship's hold, where they could sit for months, or more commonly, for years. The salt worked its magic by drawing all the water out of the meat tissue, creating an environment where the bacteria that caused spoilage simply couldn't survive. It was a stunningly effective method of preservation. The problem is, it was a little too effective. It didn't just preserve the meat, it fundamentally transformed it into something else entirely. The relentless salting process denatured the proteins, turning tender muscle into a substance with the texture of leather and the flavor of a salt lick. You learn from your crewmates that the meat has its own grim folklore. They talk about barrels opened on voyages that were packed over a decade ago. They joke about meat so hard you could carve it into a chess piece and it would last longer than the board. One of the older men, a former Royal Navy sailor, swears he once served on a ship where the ship's carpenter, in a pinch, sawed a thin plank from a large piece of salt beef to patch a leaking seam. It's likely an exaggeration, but sitting here, gnawing on this indestructible, salty chunk, you're not so sure. The quality of this meat, even by its own low standards, was notoriously inconsistent. Dishonest victual, irreverent corrupt naval suppliers were infamous for filling barrels with anything they could get away with. They used old, diseased animals and threw in the absolute worst cuts, gristle, excess fat, and sometimes things that weren't even meat. Stories of sailors finding hooves, snouts, or chunks of bone at the bottom of a meat barrel were common. This lack of quality control is a subject that historians find fascinating, as the official naval records often paint a much rosier picture than the private journals and letters of the sailors themselves. The gap between the official ration list and what a man actually found in his bowl was often immense. For pirates, who might be feasting on meat they plundered from a Spanish merchant ship, the quality could be a total lottery. To make the meat even remotely edible, it had to be soaked in fresh water for hours before cooking to try and draw some of the excess salt out. But fresh water was one of the most precious commodities on board, far too valuable to be used for a lengthy meat soaking. So more often than not, it was just boiled as is in a large cauldron, a process that did little to soften its texture or reduce its saltness. What you're eating is the result of that minimal, desperate preparation. As you chew and chew, you begin to understand the deep, primal rage that sailors felt towards the people who supplied their food. This was just a bad meal. It felt like an insult, a daily reminder of their low status. It was food that kept you alive, but only just. It provided calories and protein, but zero pleasure. It was a punishment served 3 times a day. And as the intense saltness parches your throat, you find yourself desperately wanting a drink. But you know that the water on this ship holds its own unique and unpleasant surprises. Your mouth is a desert. The overwhelming salt from the meat has left you with a burning, desperate thirst. You crave water, cool and clean, something to wash away the greasy, saline residue. But you've been on this ship long enough to know that asking for a simple cup of water isn't a simple request. You stumble towards the part of the deck where the large, iron-hooped barrels are lashed down. This is the ship's lifeblood, the water supply. A fellow pirate, the quartermaster, stands guard nearby. On a pirate ship, the quartermaster holds immense power. He's often the one who rations out food and drink, ensuring fair distribution. His presence, It tells you just how valuable this resource is. You hold out your cup. The quartermaster gives you a tired look, then nods towards one of the barrels. You unfasten the heavy wooden lid, a sense of anticipation building. You're about to get relief. You dip your cup into the barrel, and the first thing you notice is the smell. It hits you like a physical blow. It's not the clean, earthy smell of fresh water. It's a foul, swampy stench, the smell of rotten decay, like old vegetables left in a stagnant pond. It's the smell of things living and dying in a place they shouldn't. You recoil, but the thirst is too strong. You cautiously lift the cup to your lips, peering into it. The water isn't clear. It's a murky, greenish-brown color with a slick, oily sheen on the surface. You can see small, stringy green things floating in it, algae, and other, unidentifiable specks of organic matter. A thin layer of slime coats the inside of your cup. This isn't water, it's a primordial soup. You look at the quartermaster, your face a canvas of disgust. He just shrugs. Best we've got, lad. Drink up. This is the reality of water at sea. The wooden barrels it was stored in were rarely perfectly clean. They were often repurposed, having previously held wine, beer, or even things like salted fish. The porous wood was a perfect breeding ground for bacteria and algae. Over weeks and months at sea, under the heat of the sun, the water would stagnate. The algae would bloom, creating the green slime and the pondy taste. Bacteria would flourish, giving it that foul, sulfurous smell. It became what sailors grimly called stinking water. They weren't wrong. You take a small, hesitant sip. It's thick in your mouth, slimy, and has a flavor you can only describe as off. It tastes like the color green smells, but it is wet. It does, in some small way, quench the fire in your throat. You force yourself to drink half the cup, trying not to breathe through your nose, trying not to think about what you're swallowing. This leads to one of the great ironies of life at sea. A ship could be surrounded by millions of gallons of water, an endless, shimmering expanse of it, yet the crew could be slowly and agonizingly dying of thirst. The preservation of fresh water was one of the single greatest challenges of long-distance sailing. Captains were obsessed with it. Finding a source of fresh water a stream on an uncharted island, a rainstorm was a cause for genuine celebration. The foul smell of the water became the defining scent of the ship. It wasn't just in the drinking barrels. The water used for boiling the salt meat came from the same source, so the steam rising from the cook's cauldron would carry that same swampy odor, mingling it with the smell of old, salt and rancid fat. The bilge water, sloshing in the lowest part of the ship's hull, was a concentrated version of this stench, a black, foul-smelling soup of stagnant seawater, leaked grog, vomit, and all manner of refuse. The smell of rot was pervasive. It seeped into the wood, into your clothes, into your bedding. It became the background perfume to your entire existence. You stop noticing it after a while, but whenever a fresh breeze blows in from the sea, you're reminded of just how bad everything smells. There's a debate among historians about just how bad it got. Some argue that experienced crews knew how to manage their water supplies better using specific types of wood for barrels, adding a bit of vinegar or char to the water to slow the decay. But these were often naval techniques. Pirates, operating with stolen ships' unlimited resources, were likely dealing with the worst of the worst. They took whatever barrels they could find and filled them from whatever stream or well was available, with little regard for long-term purity. As you stand there, staring at the slimy water in your cup, you realize that every single element of your diet is a compromise, the descent into some level of disgust. The bread is full of bugs, the meat is a salty rock, and the water, the most basic element of life, is a foul, living ooze. Each sip is a small gamble with your health. Dysentery, often called the bloody flux, was rampant on ships, and this water was the primary culprit. It was a debilitating, often fatal illness that could sweep through a crew faster than a cannonball. You look down at the foul liquid again, You're still thirsty. You take another sip. You can't take another sip of that green, slimy water. Your thirst is a fire in your throat, but your gag reflex is stronger. You stare into the putrid contents of your cup, feeling a wave of despair. How can you possibly survive for months on this as you're about to dump it overboard in disgust? The old pirate with the blue band and the one who seems to have become your unofficial, silent mentor in misery ambles over. He glances at your cup, then at your face and lets out that familiar, gravelly chuckle. It's a bit thick today, he says, as if commenting on the weather. He pulls a small, battered-looking flask from his belt. The Admiral's come to call. The Admiral, you ask, confused. He points a gnarled finger at your cup. Admiral Grog. HES the only one who can make that bilge water drinkable. With a practiced hand, he uncorks his flask and pours a generous slug of dark, amber liquid into your cup. It's rum. Sweet, molasses-heavy smell of it instantly overpowers the swampy stench of the water. He gives your cup a swirl. The murky green mixture transforms into a cloudy, brownish concoction. Go on, he urges. Try it now. You're hesitant, but you trust this man more than your own instincts at this point. You raise the cup to your lips and take a cautious sip. The transformation is remarkable. The raw, alcoholic fire of the rum cuts through the slim innes. The sweetness masks the worst of the pond water taste. It's not good, by any stretch of the imagination. It's still a strange, slightly foul-tasting brew. But it's drinkable. You can get it down without your stomach trying up your throat. You manage to finish the entire cup, and the warmth of the rum spreads through your chest, a welcome antidote to the day's misery. You have just had your first taste of grog, and here's a little secret that shatters another pirate. This mixture was a pirate invention to get drunk faster. It was an official, top-down decree from the British Royal Navy. The name itself comes from a real person, Admiral Edward Vernon. In 1740, he was commanding the British fleet in the West Indies. He was concerned about the drunkenness of his sailors, who were entitled to a daily ration of a full half-pint of neat rum. This potent dose often led to accidents, brawls, and a general lack of discipline. So Admiral Vernon issued a famous order: the daily rum ration was to be mixed with a quart of water. His nickname among the sailors was Old Grog because of the geogram cloak he frequently wore, a coarse fabric of silk and wool. Naturally, the sailors started calling the new, diluted drink grog in a slightly mocking tribute to the man who had watered down their beloved rum. What began as a measure to control drunkenness had an unintended, and far more important, side effect. It made the foul, stagnant ship's water palatable. The alcohol killed some of the bacteria, a primitive form of sterilization, and the strong flavor of the rum masked the disgusting taste. It was a happy accident of public health. The practice was so successful that it quickly spread beyond the Royal Navy. Merchant sailors and, yes, pirates adopted it wholeheartedly. It wasn't about curbing drunkenness, it was purely about making their water supply drinkable. The exact recipe and strength of grog is a topic of historical discussion. Did pirates, with their reputation for excess, mix it stronger than the Navy standard? Almost certainly. They didn't have a meddling admiral looking over their shoulder. Their ration was likely determined by the quartermaster, based on how much rum they had plundered and how bad the water was on that particular day. A particularly foul barrel of water might call for a more generous lacing of rum. On your ship, the daily grog ration becomes the one moment of the day you almost look forward to. It marks the end of the day's hard labor. It's a social ritual, a time to gather in small groups, lean against the railings, and complain about the captain, the food, or the lack of prize ships. The rum blunts the sharp edges of your miserable existence. It makes the prospect of another dinner of weevil white biscuits and salt leather seem slightly less daunting. It doesn't solve the underlying problem. The food is still terrible. The water is still contaminated, but it provides a temporary, warming illusion of comfort. It's medicine, not for the body, but for the soul. You thank the old pirate. He just nods, takes a swig of his own grog, then stares out at the darkening sea. You've learned another crucial lesson of survival. On this ship, you don't drink water. You drink grog, and you thank a stuffy British admiral you've never met for the privilege. In this floating world of misery, the galley is the epicenter. It's not a kitchen in any sense you do recognize. It's a cramped, smoky, perpetually greasy nook, usually located on the upper deck to minimize the risk of fire spreading through the ship. A brick-lined hearth, known as a caboose, holds a smoky, sputtering fire over which hangs a single, enormous, blackened cauldron. This is the sole piece of cooking equipment. Everything the salt meat, the biscuit sludge, any fish they might be lucky enough to catch is boiled together in this one great pot. The master of this grim domain is the ship's cook. You've seen him around, a man named Silas, or at least that's what everyone calls him. He fits the stereotype perfectly. HES missing his left leg below the knee, a casualty of a close encounter with a naval cannonball years ago, and he gets around with a crude wooden peg leg that thumps a steady, rhythmic beat on the deck. He has one good eye, the other is a milky, unseeing orb. His face is a road map of old scars, and his hands are permanently stained with grease and soot. You quickly learn that the cook on a pirate ship isn't chosen for his culinary talent. No one is tasting his sioki oven or critiquing his sauce work. The job of cook, much like that of the ship's musician, was often given to a man who was no longer able-bodied in the traditional sense. A man who lost a limb in battle couldn't climb the rigging or lead a boarding party, but he could still stir a pot and chop meat. It was a way for a disabled pirate to remain a useful, contributing member of the crew to still earn a full share of the plunder. This was part of the pirate social safety net, a stark contrast to the Royal Navy, where a disabled sailor was often discharged with a meager pension, if anything at all, and left to beg on the streets. Silas's job has two primary functions, neither of which involves making food taste good. His first duty is preservation. He is the guardian of the ship's precious, limited food stores. He knows exactly how many barrels of biscuit and beef are in the hold. His task is to make them last as long as humanly possible, stretching meager supplies over unpredictable weeks at sea. This means he is, by necessity, stingy. He dispenses every ration with a scowl, as if it's coming from his own personal supply. His second, and arguably more important, duty is distribution. In the volatile, democratic society of a pirate ship, fairness is everything. A perception of unfairness, especially when it comes to food, could tear a crew apart. The pirate articles, the code that you all signed, often had specific rules about rations. Every man was entitled to an equal share. Silas is the enforcer of this rule. He has the unenviable task of hacking up the salt beef into portions that are as close to equal as possible, a difficult job when dealing with irregularly shaped chunks of meat and bone. Historians have found copies of pirate articles that explicitly state things like, "Every man has a vote in affairs of moment, has equal title to the fresh provisions, or strong liquors, at any time seized, and may use them at pleasure, unless a scarcity makes it necessary, for the good of all, to vote a retrenchment." This tells you how central food was to their social contract. You watch Silas work one afternoon. He heaves a huge, unwieldy chunk of salt beef onto a chopping block. He examines it with his good eye, turning it over and over. HES not looking for the best cuts, HES looking for a way to divide it without causing a riot. He uses a heavy cleaver, bringing it down with a series of dull, wet thuds. He measures the pieces by eye, occasionally trimming a bit off, one undadding it to another. The men watch him silently. If one man feels his portion is smaller than another's, it's a direct challenge to his honor and his rights as a member of the Brotherhood. Arguments over rations could easily escalate into knife fights. Silas's cooking is brutally simple. He dumps the hacked up meat into the cauldron of boiling seawater. Sometimes, if he's feeling generous or if supplies are plentiful, he might throw in a handful of dried peas or some onions, creating a grimst they call lobscouse. More often, it's just meat and water. He stirs the pot with a paddle-sized wooden spoon, his peg leg thumping a steady rhythm as he balances against the roll of the ship. There's a strange paradox to his role. He presides over the most miserable aspect of your daily life, yet he is also one of the most essential men on board. He's not a chef. He's a logistician, a quartermaster of calories, a butcher, and a peacemaker. His job isn't to delight your palate, it's to keep you from starving and to keep you from killing each other over the last piece of salty, rotten meat. And as he slops the steaming, foul-smelling mess into your bowl, you don't feel gratitude. You don't feel anger. You just feel a numb, resigned acceptance. This is dinner, courtesy of the one-legged man who holds the fragile piece of the ship in his greasy hands. It's been weeks now. Maybe a month you've lost track of the days, which bleed into one another in a monotonous cycle of sea and sky, work and sleep. The diet of hardtack and salt meat, washed down with foul grog, has become your grim reality. You've grown used to the hunger, the bad taste, the constant, low-grade misery of it all. But now something new is happening. Something inside your own body. It starts subtly. A feeling of profound weariness that sleep doesn't seem to cure. Your muscles ache as if from a deep bruise, even when you haven't been doing particularly strenuous work. You feel irritable, lethargic. You chalk it up to the monotony, the poor food, the endless rolling of the ship. Everyone feels tired, but then you notice something else. You're chewing on a piece of salt beef, the usual slow, laborious process. As you work your jaw, you feel a strange tenderness in your gums. Not a toothache, but a soft, puffy soreness in the flesh itself. Later that evening, you're cleaning your teeth with a frayed bit of rope, a common sailor's toothbrush. You run your tongue over your gums. They feel swollen, spongy. You press a finger against them, and when you pull it away, it's stained with a smear of bright red blood. Panic, cold and sharp, cuts through the rum-induced haze. This isn't normal. You discreetly ask one of the older sailors about it, a man from Bristol with faded tattoos covering his arms. You try to sound casual, as if it's a minor curiosity. My gums are a bit sore, you say. Bleeding a little. The sailor doesn't even look at you. He continues staring out at the horizon, his face impassive. He takes a slow drag from his clay pipe before answering, his voice low and devoid of emotion. That's how it starts. That's the spot. The old sailor doesn't need to say another word. The way he says the spot, with a finality that chills you to the bone, is answer enough. He turns away, his face grim, leaving you alone with your newfound terror. The spot. Scurvy. You've heard the word whispered in taverns, a sailor's bogeyman, a disease more feared than a Spanish warship. But it was always a story told about someone else, a distant threat. Now it's inside you. It's in your blood, in your own swollen gums. The disease doesn't descend like a storm, it seeps in like a fog, slowly and silently enveloping the entire ship. The profound weariness you felt is no longer just your own. It's everywhere. It's a collective exhaustion that settles over the crew like a heavy, damp blanket. The work of the ship, once performed with a rough efficiency, slows to a crawl. Men who once scampered up the rigging now pull themselves up the ropes with painful, labored movements. Orders are met with groans, not of insubordination, but of a deep, physical inability to comply. The ship itself feels tired, groaning uncreaking its way through the waves as if it shares the sickness of its crew. You become morbidly obsessed with your own mouth. It feels alien, a tender, foul-tasting cavern. You can feel your teeth, once firmly anchored, beginning to shift ever so slightly in their softened sockets. You live in constant fear of biting into a piece of hardtack and feeling one of them give way completely. You see other men doing the same, discreetly probing their own teeth with a fingertip, their faces etched with worry. aiming next to you at the rail coughs, and you see him quickly wipe a trickle of blood from his lips. The air becomes thick with the sweet, metallic smell of bad breath and decay. This is the full, agonizing reality of scurvy. For centuries, it was the scourge of the seas, a mysterious plague that killed more sailors than all naval battles, storms, and shipwrecks combined. We know now, with the certainty of modern science, that it's simply a deficiency of vitamin C or ascorbic acid, a vital nutrient the human body can't produce on its own. Without it, the body can't produce collagen, the glue that holds everything together: your skin, your blood vessels, your bones. You get it effortlessly from fresh fruits and vegetables. That's on a diet of long dead meat and baked flour. Your supply runs out in a matter of weeks. Your body literally begins to fall apart. The symptoms grow more bizarre and frightening. You start to notice dark, purplish-black spots blooming on the skin of your crewmates, especially on their legs and arms. They look like old, deep bruises, but they appear without any injury. One morning, you're rechecking your own legs and you find them, a small constellation of ugly spots on your shin. They don't hurt, but they are a terrifying, visible sign of the decay happening within. Then you see the most unnerving manifestation of the disease. You're working alongside a pirate named Finn, mending the sail. He has a long, pale scar running down his forearm from a knife fight years ago. As he pulls a needle through the heavy canvas, you glance at the scar. It looks wrong. It's no longer pale and flat. It's puffy, reddish, then looks strangely fresh, as if the injury happened last week, not last decade. This is one of scurvy's cruelest and most surreal tricks. With collagen production at a standstill, the body can no longer maintain old repairs. Scar tissue dissolves. Old wounds, even those that have been healed for years, literally reopen from the inside out. The sailors themselves had no idea what caused it. The true nature of vitamins wouldn't be understood for another 200 years. This is a point of constant fascination for historians. What did they think was happening? Their theories were a mix of superstition and desperation. Some blamed the bad air of the sea. Others thought it was a punishment from God, or a result of the constant dampness. They knew, from bitter experience, that getting to land and eating fresh greens and fruits could cure it, but they didn't know why. Was it the fruit, the fresh water, or just the feeling of solid ground beneath their feet lacking a scientific explanation? Citrus fruit was just one of many folk remedies, often given no more weight than other, useless cures like drinking diluted sulfuric acid, or burying a man up to his neck in warm sand. The mood on the ship transforms. The boisterous, chaotic energy is gone, replaced by a quiet, brooding despair. The fear is no longer of the enemy, but of the self. Your own body has become the traitor. You lie in your hammock at night, not sleeping, but listening to the chorus of groans and soft cries from the men around you. The ship is no longer a pirate vessel on the hunt for gold. It has become a floating infirmary, a charnel house in waiting, drifting aimlessly as its crew slowly rots from the inside out. The only thing you can think about, the only thing anyone can think about, is land. The ship has become a haunted vessel, drifting on a listless sea under a hazy, indifferent sun. The hunt for gold and glory is a distant memory, a foolish dream from another lifetime. The only quest now, the single, all-consuming obsession that unites every man on board, is the hunt for a patch of green. Any green, an island, a coastline, even a single blessed tree on the horizon. The lookout, perched high in the crow's nest, is no longer scanning for the sails of a fat merchantman, searching for a smudge of land, his eyes straining until they burned, praying for a glimpse of anything other than the endless, mocking blue of the ocean. This desperate search for a cure for scurvy transformed the very nature of piratical and naval navigation. It wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was a life-or-death race against the body's internal clock. Captains, pirates included, would often chart their courses not by the most direct route, but via a series of known or hoped-for landfalls where they could resupply. The Caribbean, with its archipelago of countless small islands, became a pirate haven not just because it was a strategic location for preying on shipping lanes, but because it was a place where you were ever more than a few weeks' sail from a potential cure. The men's talk, what little of it there is no longer about plunder. It's about food, but not the food they have. It's about the food they dream of. They speak of it in hushed, reverent tones, like a religious catechism. An orange, so bright and perfect you could see it from a mile away. A lime, so sour it would make your whole face pucker. A handful of berries, bursting with sweet juice. These simple things, once taken for granted, have become the most valuable treasure in the world. They are the El Dorado of this voyage. You find yourself lost in these feverish daydreams. You can almost feel the weight of an orange in your hand. Smell the sharp, clean scent as you pierce the peel with your thumbnail. You can taste the explosion of sweet, acidic juice in your mouth, a sensation so powerful and so real that when you swallow, the return to the dry, foul reality of your own mouth is a crushing disappointment. The psychological toll is immense. Hope becomes a form of torture. A cloud on the horizon is mistaken for land, sending a brief, agonizing ripple of excitement through the ship before it dissolves back into vapor. A floating log is mistaken for a canoe, a sign of nearby inhabitants. Every mirage, every trick of the light, is a fresh stab of despair. The ship's quartermaster, the man in charge of the dwindling supplies, becomes the focus of a quiet, desperate attention. Does he know where they are? Is he steering them in the right direction? Paranoia begins to fester. Men start to eye each other with suspicion. Does someone have a hidden stash? A shriveled lemon, saved from the last port? Such an item would be worth more than any gold coin. Finding it on a man would be a death sentence. Historians debate how much pre-modern sailors truly understood the connection between specific foods and scurvy. While the formal discovery of the cure is credited to James Lind in the 1740s, there's evidence that sailors had a folk understanding of anti-score but ICS long before that. They knew certain things worked, even if they didn't know why. Accounts from the 16th and 17th centuries mention captains making special efforts to obtain oranges and lemons for their crews. Was scurvy still so rampant? The problem was supply. Fresh fruit was impossible to store for long voyages. It would rot long before the hardtack and salt beef. So the knowledge of a cure was useless if you were stuck in the middle of the Atlantic with no land in sight. One afternoon, a cry comes from the crow's nest. It's not the usual shout. It's a weak, cracking, desperate croak. Land ho. No one cheers. There isn't the energy for it. But every man who can move drags himself to the rail. You pull yourself up, your arms trembling with weakness. Then you see it. It's not a mirage this time. It's a faint, dark green line on the horizon, low and solid. A profound, shuddering sigh of relief passes through the crew. It's a sound of pure, unadulterated hope. Tears stream down the faces of hardened killers, men who wouldn't flinch at the mouth of a cannon. They are not crying for joy, but for deliverance. The captain, his own face pale and drawn, shouts a course correction, his voice hoarse but firm. The ship, which has felt like a coffin for weeks, suddenly feels like a vessel of salvation. Every sail is unfurled. Every man who can work pulls on a rope, finding a last, desperate reserve of strength. The ship leans into the wind, picking up speed, racing towards that thin green line. You are not racing towards a place to plunder or hide. You are racing towards a pharmacy. You are racing for your lives. The island rises from the sea to meet you, a vision of vibrant, impossible green. After months of staring at the uniform blue of the ocean and the weathered gray of the ship, the sheer intensity of the color is overwhelming. It's a green so lush and alive, it almost hurts your eyes. As the ship drops anchor in a calm, turquoise bay, the air changes. The perpetual stench of bilge water. And it's replaced by the smell of damp earth, flowering plants, unripe, decaying fruit, and it's the most beautiful perfume you have ever encountered. There is no orderly shore party. The moment the anchor is down, it's a desperate, frantic scramble. Men, weak and stumbling, tumble into the long boats. Some, too impatient to wait, simply slide over the side of the ship and begin to swim. Their movements slow and clumsy. You're in one of the first boats, and as it grates against the sandy beach, you don't wait for it to be secure. You leap out into the knee-deep water and stagger onto the solid, unmoving land. The sensation of the ground not rolling beneath your feet is so strange that you almost fall. But there's no time to get reacquainted with solid earth. Your body is screaming for one thing. You and the others plunge into the dense foliage, a ragged, desperate army. You are not looking for treasure chests. You are foraging like starving animals. You grab at leaves, stuffing them into your mouth, not even knowing what they are. You tear fruit from low-hanging branches, strange, brightly colored things you don't recognize, and devour them, rind and dull, the juice running down your chin and staining your shirt. The taste is explosive, a riot of sweetness and soreness that feels like a jolt of electricity to your dying system. And then you see them. Turtles. Giant sea turtles, basking on the sand at the far end of the beach. They are huge, ancient creatures, some as large as a small table, their shells glistening in the sun. To your scurvy-ravaged mind, they are not majestic wonders of nature. They are walking pantries. A shot goes up, and the pirates descend on the turtles. It's a clumsy, brutal affair. The men, weak as they are, work together, using poles and sheer manpower to flip the huge reptiles onto their backs. Helpless and flailing, the turtles are easy prey. The ship's cook, Silas, is there, his peg leg sinking into the soft sand, wielding a heavy butcher's axe. The work is grim, but no one flinches. This is not about cruelty, it's about survival. Soon, a fire is roaring on the beach, and the air is filled with the smell of roasting meat. For the first time in months, you are eating something fresh. The turtle meat is rich and doily, with a texture somewhere between beef and veal. It's the most delicious thing you have ever tasted. But even more valuable than the meat is the blood. Silas and his assistants collect the turtle's blood in buckets. It is still warm. This is one of the more gruesome, yet vital, facts of survival at sea. Turtle blood, and the blood of other fresh-killed animals, was seen as a powerful tonic. It was rich in iron and, unbeknownst to them, contained enough vitamin C to halt the immediate, life-threatening effects of scurvy. Men line up, their tin cups held out, and Silas ladles out the dark, viscous liquid. You take your cup, your stomach turning slightly, but you look around at the others, drinking it down without hesitation. You hold your breath and do the same. It's warm, salty, and tastes powerfully of iron, but you can almost feel the strength seeping back into your limbs. Historians have documented the vital role that turtles played in the era of exploration and piracy. Islands in the Caribbean and the Galapagos were famous for their turtle populations, and they became essential provisioning stops for any ship in the area. The turtles were a perfect food source. They were easy to catch, provided a huge amount of fresh meat, and most importantly, they could be kept alive on the ship for weeks or even months without food or water, providing a source of fresh meat long after the ship had left land behind. They were, in essence, living, self-preserving rations. For the next few days, the island is your Eden. You do nothing but eat and rest. You gorge yourself on fruit, on roasted turtle, on edible roots that you dig from the ground with your bare hands. The change is miraculously fast. The bleeding in your gums stops. The terrible lethargy begins to lift. You can feel the life, the actual sensation of health flowing back into you. You watch as the ugly bruises on your legs begin to fade, and the terrible, reopened scar on Finn's arm starts to look like a scar again, knitting itself closed. You are not the same man who crawled off this ship a few days ago. The specter of death has receded, but as you sit by the fire gnawing on a turtle steak, you look back at the ship floating in the bay. You know that soon you will have to get back on that vessel. and you know that the barrels of salt beef and weevil wye biscuits are still waiting for you in the hold. This island is just a temporary reprieve. The sea and its miserable diet are waiting to reclaim you. The feast on the beach feels like a fever dream. For a few glorious days, you lived like kings, gorging on fresh turtle meat and exotic fruit. But the island's pantry is not infinite, and the captain is getting restless. The lure of plunder, temporarily eclipsed by the desperation of scurvy, is calling to him again. The ship's water casks have been refilled from a freshwater stream, and several live turtles, captured and bound, have been hauled aboard to become your future walking meals. It's time to go. As the island shrinks behind you, a familiar sense of dread settles back into your gut. You know what's coming. The return to the old diet is a brutal shock to your newly rejuvenated system. The first meal back on the ship is a psychological blow. Silas, the one-legged cook, serves up the familiar a chunk of hard, stringy salt beef and a weevil-riddled biscuit. After days of fresh, flavorful food, it tastes even worse than you remember. The saltness of the meat is an assault on your tongue. The biscuit, even when soaked into a grog-laced sludge, is a gritty, flavorless paste. Having tasted real nourishment, rebels against this foul substitute. You're not the only one feeling this way. The mood of the crew, so euphoric on the island, has soured. The men are sullen, irritable. The temporary cure has only highlighted the daily misery of their existence. Now that they feel healthy again, their tolerance for the terrible food is gone. This is where the desperate act of fishing comes in. On a ship in the middle of the deep ocean, fishing isn't a leisurely pastime. It's a desperate gamble. You might imagine a pirate ship trailing a dozen lines, constantly hauling in a bounty of tuna and Nehemia. The reality is far less romantic. Deep-sea fishing with handlines from a moving sailing ship is an incredibly inefficient and frustrating endeavor. The open ocean is a vast, blue desert. Schools of fish are few and far between. Yet, they try. Any man not on active duty might be found leaning over the rail. A simple line baited with a scrap of salt pork or a piece of colored cloth, jigging it up and down in the water for hours on end. More often than not, they catch nothing. The line just dangles there, a thin thread of hope in an empty expanse. The hours of fruitless effort only add to the frustration and boredom of the voyage, but sometimes they get lucky. A cry of "fish on" will send a ripple of genuine excitement through the ship. Every available man rushes to help haul in the line. It could be a bonito, a dolphin-fish Nehemia, or even a small shark. Whatever it is, it's not salted. It's not riddled with insect larvae. It's a prize more valuable than a piece of eight. The catch is immediately rushed to Silas. There's no fancy preparation. He guts it, chops it into chunks, and throws it into the communal cauldron, boiling it alongside the salt beef. This is a culinary detail that modern chefs would find horrifying, but it made perfect sense to them. The single pot was the only cooking vessel they had. The fresh fish would be cooked in the same salty, scummy water as everything else, taking on the flavors of the pot. Still, it was a welcome change. The pieces of fresh fish, soft and flaky, were a treasure to be sought out in the murky stew. The desperation for fresh protein led to some strange dietary choices. Sharks were a common catch. While some species are perfectly edible, others, like the Greenland shark, have flesh that is toxic, if not specially prepared. Did pirates know the difference? Probably not. The question of how often sailors were sickened by eating the wrong kind of fish is a point historians can only speculate on, as a case of food poisoning would likely have been indistinguishable from the myriad of other diseases plaguing the crew. They likely ate whatever they could catch and hoped for the best. Another, more unsettling source of fresh food was the pilot fish and drem, or, as that often attached themselves to the ship's hull. Men would lean over the side with small nets or spears, trying to snag these tiny, opportunistic feeders. It was a meager reward for a lot of effort, but it was something. The act of fishing, even when unsuccessful, served a purpose. It was a distraction, a way to combat the crushing monotony of the voyage. It provided a sliver of hope, a belief that you could, through your own effort, supplement the wretched rations you were given. But this hope was a double-edged sword. Every day without a catch was another small failure, another reminder of your powerlessness against the vast, empty ocean. As you stand at the rail, your own line angling uselessly in the deep blue water, you are not just fishing for food. You're fishing for a reason to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. And most days, you come up empty. You lie in your hammock, suspended in the creaking, groaning darkness of the lower deck. You're trying to sleep, but it's impossible. Something is crawling on your face. You swipe at it with a curse, feeling the tiny, frantic legs of a cockroach before you fling it into the dark. You sit up, listening. The ship is alive with sounds that have nothing to do with the sea or the wind. It's the sound of a million tiny, unseen lives. The scuttling of rats in the bilge, the rustle of cockroaches in the cracks of the bulkheads, the faint, persistent chewing sound of insects in the very wood of the ship. You are not alone on this vessel. You are part of a complex, and frankly disgusting, ecosystem. You and the other pirates may be the masters of the ship, but you are vastly outnumbered by its other inhabitants. These are the uninvited passengers, the stowaways who thrive in the filth and shadows, rats and cockroaches. They are everywhere. The ship is their world. They are born in its dark corners, they feed on its refuse, and they die in its walls. The rats are the boldest. You see them at night, sleek, dark shapes darting across the deck, their eyes glinting in the moonlight. They are fattened, fearless, gored on stolen food. They are your direct competitors for the dwindling supplies in the hold. The ship's hold is their kingdom. It's a dark, damp labyrinth of barrels, crates, and coils of rope. Down there, the rat population has exploded. They chew through the canvas sacks of flour and oats, leaving behind a trail of filth. They gnaw through the wooden hoops of the barrels, trying to get at the water or the meat inside. Their constant gnawing isn't just about food. Their teeth never stop growing, so they have to chew on things to wear them down. They will chew on ropes, on sails, even on the ship's timbers, causing slow, insidious damage that can go unnoticed for weeks. Fighting them is a constant, losing battle. The crew sets crude traps. Sometimes they organize rat hunts, arming themselves with belaying pins and chasing the creatures through the hold in a chaotic, violent frenzy. But for every rat they kill, 10 more seem to take its place. The ship's cat, if they are lucky enough to have one, is a prized member of the crew. But even the most dedicated Mauser is overwhelmed. Then there are the cockroaches. They are more insidious than the rats. They can get into everything. You find them in your bedding, in your sea chest, and worst of all, in your food. They swarm over any scrap of spilled food on the deck. When Silas serves the meals, you have to guard your bowl, waving them away as they scurry towards the smell of your meager ration. This infestation was just a nuisance, it was a serious threat to the food supply. A significant portion of a ship's provisions could be consumed or spoiled by pests. Historians studying naval records have found official reports estimating that rodent and insect damage could account for the loss of up to 10% of a ship's victuals on a long voyage. For a pirate ship, with its less than ideal storage and sanitation, the number was likely much higher. The ever-present reality of these pests is another detail often glossed over in romantic pirate tales. Life on board was just a battle against the elements on enemy ships. It was a constant, frustrating war against vermin. This shared battle created a strange sort of camaraderie. A common enemy, even a tiny one, can unite people. Men would exchange tips on the best way to rig a trap or how to waterproof their personal supply of tobacco to keep the roaches out. Some sailors, out of sheer desperation and a desire for fresh protein, were known to eat the rats. This is a grim detail that appears in some historical accounts of long, desperate voyages, particularly among shipwrecked sailors or those on becalmed vessels. Was this a common practice on pirate ships? It's hard to say for sure. The historical record is largely silent on such a taboo subject, and it's one of those questions scholars can only speculate on. It likely wasn't a regular menu item, but in a situation of extreme starvation, with the choice between eating a rat or dying, it's not hard to imagine what a desperate man might do. Tonight, you don't care about historical speculation. You just want to sleep. But every rustle, every tiny tickle of movement in the dark is a reminder that you share your cramped, floating home with a horde of hungry, unwelcome guests. They are a living, breathing symbol of the decay and filth that permeates every aspect of your life at sea. You pull your rough wool blanket up to your chin, not for warmth, but to create a fragile barrier against the things that crawl in the night. When it finally comes, it's shallow and uneasy. The sun beats down. The deck is hot under your bare feet, and the mood is foul. The brief respite of the island is a fading memory, and the grim reality of the ship has set in again, harder than before. The food is disgusting. The water is slimy, and the work is endless. Fights have been breaking out over trivial things, a misplaced tool, an imagined slight. The fragile camaraderie of the crew is fraying at the edges, worn thin by hunger and boredom. In this sea of misery, there is only one true solace, one reliable escape room. The daily grog ration is no longer enough. In the evenings, after the work is done, the men gather in small, sullen groups. The quartermaster, under pressure from the crew, unlocks the spirit room and doles out an extra measure of neat, fiery rum. It's the one thing on this ship that brings a moment of genuine pleasure. You take your cup. The liquid is dark and smells sweet, with a heavy, intoxicating aroma of molasses and burnt sugar. You take a long swallow. It burns a familiar, welcome path down your throat and into your stomach, spreading warmth that feels like liquid sunshine. The physical effect is immediate. The weariness in your muscles seems to recede. The gnawing hunger in your belly is dulled. The sharp edges of your anxiety begin to soften and blur. This is why rum was the currency of the pirate world, more essential than gold. Gold couldn't make weevil why biscuits taste better. Gold couldn't cure the soul-crushing boredom of a long, calm spell at sea. But rum could. It was a social lubricant, a painkiller, and an anesthetic for the soul. It was the fuel that kept the chaotic engine of a pirate ship running. You look around at your crewmates. As the rum takes hold, the transformation is visible. The tense, angry silence gives way to boisterous conversation and laughter. Men who were on the verge of drawing knives an hour ago are now clapping each other on the back, sharing stories. Someone pulls out a fiddle, and soon a clumsy, drunken dance is underway on the deck. The rum washes away the misery, replacing it with a temporary, artificial joy. It allows you to forget, for a few precious hours, that you are trapped on a floating prison, eating rotten food and slowly succumbing to disease. The historical connection between sailors and rum is profound. The Caribbean, the epicenter of the golden age of piracy, was also the epicenter of sugar production. And rum is a byproduct of sugar. Molasses, the thick, dark syrup left over after sugar cane has been refined, was once considered an industrial waste product. But distillers discovered that this cheap, plentiful goo could be fermented and distilled into a potent alcoholic spirit. The result was rum, and it was cheap, strong, and readily available throughout the islands where pirates operated. It became the drink of choice for pirates not just because they liked it, but because it was practical. Beer, the traditional drink of English sailors, spoiled quickly in the tropical heat. Wine was expensive and often plundered from Spanish or French ships. But rum was a local product. It was durable, and its high alcohol content meant it didn't spoil. In fact, some say it got better with age in the rocking barrels of a ship's hold. Whether this is true or a myth perpetuated by wishful drinkers is a matter of debate among spirit historians. But this liquid courage came at a steep price. The reliance on alcohol was a double-edged sword. While it fostered camaraderie, it also fueled violence and recklessness. Many of the infamous pirate stories of brutal infighting and maroonings were born from drunken squabbles. The captain's ability to control his crew's access to rum was a key part of maintaining discipline. The good captain knew when to be generous with the bottle and when to lock the spirit room tight. Tonight, the captain is being generous. The rum flows freely, and the deck descends into a familiar, chaotic scene. You feel a sense of belonging in this drunken revelry. You are all brothers in this shared escape. You drink, you laugh, you sing off-key sea shanties. For a brief period, the romantic fantasy of the pirate life feels real. You are wild, you are free, you are masters of your own destiny, but as you drain your cup and stumble back to your hammock, the illusion begins to fade. The pleasant warmth of the rum gives way to a dull, throbbing headache. The artificial joy evaporates, leaving behind the cold, hard reality of your situation. The rum hasn't changed anything. The biscuits are still full of worms, the meat is still rotten, and the horizon is still empty. It was just a temporary truce in your long, miserable war against the sea, that tomorrow you will wake up with an aching head and a parched mouth, and you will have to do it all over again. The lookout's cry slices through the monotonous afternoon haze. Sail ho! This time, the cry is different. It's not the weak, hopeful croak of a man searching for land. It's a sharp, hungry yell. Every man on deck freezes. All activity stops. A jolt of pure, predatory adrenaline shoots through the ship, a feeling you haven't experienced in weeks. The lethargy, the boredom, the simmering resentment, it all vanishes, replaced by a single, focused intensity. This is what you came for. The captain is already climbing the rigging, a spyglass in his hand. He braces himself against the mast, scans the horizon, and then shouts down to the deck. Just a merchantman, flying Portuguese colors undriding low in the water. Chess heavy-laden boys. A roar goes up from the crew. A real, guttural roar of excitement. This is the cure for all their ills. A ship riding low in the water means it's full of cargo. And cargo means wealth. But as the men rush to their stations, preparing the cannons and sharpening their cutlasses, you know they are thinking about more than just gold and silver. They are thinking about the ship's pantry. The chase is on. Your ship, a nimble sloop built for speed, comes alive. The sails are trimmed to catch every breath of wind. The vessel leans into the sea, cutting through the waves with a new-found purpose. The merchant ship, a larger, clumsier vessel, is slow. They have seen you. You can see the panic on their decks, the frantic, disorganized activity as they try to crowd on more sail to escape. But they are a fat cow, and you are a wolf. The chase lasts for hours. The sun begins to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and dread. But you are gaining. The distance closes. You can now make out the details of the other ship, the figures of the crew running on the deck. The captain gives the order, and your ship's flag is lowered. In its place, a new flag is run up the mast. The black flag, the Jolly Roger. The effect is instantaneous and chilling. It's a declaration. We are not a navy. We are not privateers. We are pirates. Surrender or die. A cannon shot is fired across their bow, a warning. The merchant captain has a choice: fight and risk destruction, or surrender and hope for mercy. He makes the wise decision. His ship slows, and you pull alongside. Grappling hooks are thrown, and your crew, a screaming, wild horde, swarms over the rails. The resistance is minimal. The merchant crew, outnumbered and terrified, throws down their weapons. The ship is yours. The captain and the quartermaster take control of the prize, but the rest of the crew has one destination in mind. They bypass the captain's cabin, ignore the passengers. They storm the ship's hold and galley, their eyes wild with a hunger that has nothing to do with greed. and what they find is paradise. You follow them down into the hold. It's like stepping into another world. There are barrels, yes, but they are filled with things you had forgotten existed. Barrels of Spanish wine, crates of olive oil, and food, real food. Sacks of fine white flour, not the coarse, gritty stuff your biscuits are made from. Sacks of dried beans, onions, and garlic. There are strings of dried red peppers hanging from a beam. And in a special, cooler part of the hold, there are crates packed with precious, life-giving lemons and oranges, destined for some rich merchant's stable in Lisbon. But the greatest treasures are the living ones. In a pen on the deck, there are live chickens clucking in confusion, and a pig squealing in terror. This isn't just fresh meat, it's living, breathing food. A cheer goes up that is louder and more heartfelt than any cheer for finding a chest of gold. The men fall upon the supplies like locusts. They tear open the flour sacks, running their hands through the clean, white powder. They smash open a barrel of wine, dipping their cups directly into the stream of rich, reed liquid. A pirate grabs a chicken, and with a swift, practiced motion wrings its neck. The question of what pirates did with plundered food is interesting. Did they just gorge themselves, or did they carefully ration it? The answer, according to historical accounts and the logic of their situation, is both. The initial seizure of a ship was almost always followed by a massive, chaotic feast, but the quartermaster, a man always thinking of the long voyage ahead, would quickly step in to take stock and secure the new provisions for the collective good. Tonight, however, is for feasting. The pig is slaughtered. The chickens are plucked. Your own crew's miserable cauldron is supplemented by the merchantman's superior cooking pots. Soon, the air is filled with the smells of roasting pork, sizzling chicken, and baking bread. For the first time, you are eating not out of grim necessity, but for pure, unadulterated pleasure. The wine flows freely. The food is plentiful. The misery of the past few months melts away in a glorious, chaotic celebration. You tear into a piece of roasted pork, the fat dripping down your chin, and you wash it down with a swig of real wine. This is what it's all about. This feast is the true treasure. It is the reward for all the suffering, the justification for all the risk. The night of the feast is a blur of grease, wine, and glorious, chaotic noise. You wake the next morning on the deck of the captured merchant ship, your head throbbing from the unaccustomed richness of the wine, but your stomach full and content for the first time in memory. The sun is already high in the sky. The work of transferring the plunder from the prize ship to your own is well underway, supervised by the ever-practical quartermaster. But this is not a day for work. This is a day for celebration. The captain makes a decision that is met with a universal roar of approval. You are not putting back out to sea immediately. You are heading for the nearest spit of sand, a tiny, uncharted island that's nothing more than a beach and a few palm trees. You are going to have a proper party. Landing on the beach is a completely different experience from the last time you made landfall. You are not a crew of desperate, scurvy-ridden skeletons crawling ashore in search of a cure. You are a victorious army, laden with the spoils of war. The long boats are filled not with sick men, but with barrels of wine, sacks of flour, and the remaining carcasses of the pig and chickens. A massive bonfire is built in the center of the beach, the flames leaping high into the afternoon sky. The atmosphere is electric. The strict hierarchy of the ship dissolves. The captain drinks from the same barrel as the lowest cabin boy. The quartermaster, usually a stern figure of authority, laughs and jokes with the men. This is the pirate ideal of democracy in its purest form. The captured merchant crew, now prisoners, are put to work. They are the ones turning the spit, roasting the last of the pork. Your crew, their captors, lounge on the sand, drinking wine straight from the barrel and telling exaggerated stories of the capture. The scene is one of complete, unrestrained hedonism. This is the classic image of the pirate beach party. a scene immortalized in countless books and movies. But was it real? Historians generally agree that yes, these kinds of celebrations absolutely happened. After a successful plunder, especially after a long and difficult time at sea, a crew needed to blow off steam. A marooning party, not to be confused with the punishment of being marooned, was a way to release the pent-up tension, frustration, and fear of their daily lives. It was a massive, collective exhale. The food is the centerpiece of the celebration. Silas, your one-legged cook, is in his element. For once, he has real ingredients to work with. He directs the prisoners to bake a crude form of bread in the hots and undashes of the fire. He creates a massive, bubbling stew in the ship's cauldron, which has been brought ashore. This time, it's not a thin, salty broth. It's a thick, rich mixture of beans, onions, garlic, and chunks of the last of the salt beef, which is now used merely as a salty seasoning rather than the main ingredient. The fresh food is the star. You tear off a piece of the hot, smoky bread and dip it into the stew. The flavor is incredible. It's real food, prepared with a kind of joyous abandon. You sit on the sand, your back against a palm tree, a tin cup full of wine in one hand and a bowl of stew in the other, and you feel a sense of profound, uncomplicated happiness. There's an interesting academic debate about the purpose of these rituals. Were they just simple parties, or did they serve a more complex social function? Some sociologists and historians argue that these moments of extreme indulgence were essential for reinforcing the bonds of the crew. By sharing in the feast, the pirates were reaffirming their collective identity. They were a brotherhood, set apart from the normal world and its rules. The feast was a ritual that celebrated their success and their outlaw status. It was a way of saying, we take what we want, and we enjoy it together. As the sun sets, the party grows wilder. The fiddle and accordion appear, and the music is loud and frantic. Men dance around the fire, their shadows leaping and twisting. Fights break out, but they are drunken and good-natured, quickly broken up by laughing comrades. It is a scene of pure, anarchic freedom. You lean back, the wine making your head spin pleasantly, and you watch the firelight dance on the faces of your crewmates. These men who a week ago were sullen, sick, and starving are now full of life and laughter. The transformation is staggering. And you realize that the food, the fresh food and good wine, is the reason. It hasn't just healed their bodies, it has healed their spirits. For this one night, on this forgotten strip of sand, the romantic myth of the pirate life feels completely, undoubtedly true. The euphoria of the beach party fades with the morning sun, leaving behind pounding headaches and the gritty reality of a return to the ship. The live chickens have been penned, and the last of the fresh pork has been salted down for the journey ahead. As you sail away from the little island, the mood is subdued but not grim. The memory of the feast and the presence of real food in the hold has created a buffer against the usual despair. A new challenge arises: how to manage these newfound riches. On a normal ship, the captain would have sole authority over the provisions. But this is a pirate ship, and things are different. You are about to witness a core principle of pirate life in action: democratic distribution, all governed by the articles you signed. The quartermaster calls a meeting on the main deck. The entire crew gathers. This is not a captain giving orders, it is a town hall meeting. The subject is the captured provisions. The fine white flour, the beans, the onions, the wine, and especially the precious lemons and orange show. Should they be used, should they be consumed quickly, in another series of feasts, or should they be carefully rationed to supplement the wretched daily fare for as long as possible? This is where the famous pirate code, or Articles of Agreement, comes into play. These were not just a myth, they were real documents, a set of rules that governed the operation of the ship and the conduct of the crew. Each man, upon joining, had to sign or make his mark on the articles, swearing an oath to uphold them. While the rules varied from ship to ship, they almost always contained clauses about the fair distribution of food and drink, A lively debate ensues. One faction, led by a young, hot-headed pirate, argues for living in the moment. We risked our lives for this bounty. Let's enjoy it now, for tomorrow we might be at the bottom of the sea. His sentiment is met with a few boisterous cheers. Then, the old sailor with the blue bandana speaks up. His voice is calm and steady. And what happens in 2 weeks when the wine is gone and we're back to drinking slime, when we're eating worm castles and staring scurvy in the face again? A full belly today means an empty one tomorrow. We ration it. A little pleasure every day is better than a single feast followed by misery. His practical wisdom resonates with the more experienced members of the crew. The quartermaster, acting as a sort of moderator, calls for a vote. Every man on board, from the captain down to you, the recent recruit, has an equal say. Hands are raised. The count is taken. The decision is clear: the provisions will be rationed. The quartermaster is now entrusted with this task. His role on a pirate ship was unique and powerful, a concept that often surprises people. He was not the captain's subordinate. In many ways, he was the captain's equal. And in matters of internal discipline and the distribution of supplies, his authority was supreme. He was the crew's representative, elected to ensure the captain didn't become a tyrant and every man got his fair share. The famous pirate Captain Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts had articles that stated the captain and quartermaster should each receive 2 shares of any plunder, while regular sailors received 1, but when it came to provisions, all were equal. Historians are fascinated by this pirate model of governance. Was it a genuine experiment in grassroots democracy, or was it simply a practical system born of necessity to prevent mutiny on a ship full of armed, unruly men? The academic consensus leans towards the latter, but with an acknowledgement that it created a remarkably egalitarian society, at least in comparison to the rigid, brutal autocracy of a naval or merchant vessel. So, the new reality of your diet begins. The foundation is still the same salt beef and hardtack, but now it's supplemented. The cook, Silas, now adds a handful of beans and onions to the daily stew, making it thicker and more flavorful. Each man receives a small, carefully measured ration of wine with his evening meal, a luxury that feels incredibly decadent. And once a week, the quartermaster ceremoniously doles out the most precious treasure of all, a single lemon or orange for each man. You hold the fruit in your hand. It's a small, simple thing, but it feels like a jewel. You peel it slowly, savoring the sharp, clean smell. You eat it section by section, the burst of acidic juice a miracle in your mouth. This small, weekly ritual is more than just a source of vitamin C. It's a symbol of your victory. It's a tangible result of the pirate democracy you are a part of. And it's a constant, delicious reminder that even on a ship built for chaos, there is a strange and binding order. The weeks following the plunder are the best you've known at sea. The supplemental rations, though meager, have made a world of difference. The mood is better, the work feels lighter, and the specter of scurvy has been banished, at least for now. But the good times are a finite resource. The sacks of beans and onions are getting lighter. The wine barrels are sounding hollow when tapped. The precious crate of citrus fruits is almost empty. As the good food dwindles, the old anxieties begin to creep back in, and with them comes a new, uglier poison suspicion. It starts with whispers. A man complains that his piece of meat looks smaller than his neighbor's. Another mutters that the quartermaster seems to be pouring a heavier hand of wine for his friends. These are small, petty grievances born from the fear of returning to the days of pure misery. But they are seeds of discord planted in fertile ground. The real trouble begins over a handful of dried figs. They were part of the plunder, a small, sticky, delicious luxury that was being carefully rationed out by Silas, the cook. One evening, Silas announces that the figs are gone. He had counted them that morning, and now a significant portion has vanished. They have been stolen. A wave of collective anger ripples through the crew. This isn't like stealing a gold coin, which is a crime against the collective future. This is stealing food. It's a crime against the collective present, a theft from the stomach of every man on board. It's a profound violation of the trust that holds this fragile society together. The captain calls an immediate assembly. The entire crew is gathered on the deck, the mood tense and ugly. This is a direct challenge to the pirate code. The articles you signed are very clear on this matter. Stealing from a fellow crew member was one of the most serious offenses a pirate could commit, often punishable by death or marooning. The egalitarian system only works if everyone respects it. The quartermaster, in his role as the ship's chief disciplinarian, begins an investigation. He questions men one by one. The atmosphere becomes thick with accusation and denial. Men who were friends yesterday now eye each other with distrust. You watch as the crew's solidarity, forged in shared hardship and drunken celebration, begins to crumble. This is the dark side of the pirate democracy. When things are good, it fosters brotherhood, but when resources become scarce and trust is broken, it can quickly devolve into paranoia and mob justice. You see a small group of men corner a young pirate named Thomas. He is a quiet, nervous lad, an easy target. They accuse him, claiming they saw him near the galley when the figs disappeared. He denies it, his voice trembling, but the accusers are loud and confident. The hunger that gnaws at your belly has a psychological component too. It makes you irritable, suspicious, and prone to anger. Historians and psychologists who study the effects of starvation have noted this time and time again. Prolonged hunger shortens tempers and erodes social cohesion. What you are witnessing is a textbook example of this phenomenon. The crew, facing the imminent return of a starvation diet, is looking for a scapegoat, the target for their fear and frustration. The situation escalates. A knife is drawn. The old sailor with the blue band and his steps between the accusers and Thomas, his presence a calming force. No proof, no punishment, he growls. That's the code. The debate rages. Was the code designed to protect the innocent, or to maintain order at any cost? This is a philosophical question that legal scholars might ponder. But here on the deck of a pirate ship, it is a matter of life and death. The trial is a chaotic affair, a shouting match with no judge, a shouting match with no judge or jury, only a mob of hungry, angry men. Ultimately, no concrete proof can be found. The figs are gone, but no one can definitively say who took them. Thomas is released, but he is now a marked man, an object of suspicion and resentment. The incident is officially over, but the trust is not restored. The camaraderie has been poisoned. That night, as you eat your meager, figless meal, the silence is heavy. You look at the faces of your crewmates, illuminated by the swaying lantern light. You no longer see brothers. You see potential thieves. You see rivals in the desperate competition for survival. The theft of a few dried figs has stolen something far more valuable, the belief that you were all in this together. And you realize that the greatest danger on this ship might not be the Royal Navy or a raging storm, but the hunger that can turn friends into enemies. The ship feels different now. The stolen figs were a symptom of a deeper sickness. The good food is all but gone, and the crew has retreated back into the grim, sullen silence of the hungry. Your body, too, is protesting the return to the old ways. The aches are returning to your joints. You check your gums daily, a ritual of dread, waiting for the first sign of blood. In this atmosphere of decay and distrust, another, more insidious problem begins to fester, the realm of makeshift medicine. On a Royal Navy vessel, there would be a surgeon, a man with at least some formal, if rudimentary, medical training. He would have a chest of instruments, tinctures, and potions. On your pirate ship, there is no such luxury. The closest thing you have to a doctor is the ship's carpenter. This might sound bizarre, but it has a grim logic to it. The carpenter was the master of the saw, and in the brutal world of 18th century medicine, The most common major medical procedure was amputation. If a man's or more leg was shattered by a cannonball or developed a life-threatening infection, the only option was to cut it off. The man who was best at sawing through a wooden mast was considered the most qualified to saw through a human bone. The carpenter often inherited the role of saw bones by default. Your carpenter is a burly, quiet man named Jonas. He is a master at his primary craft, but you pray you never have to witness his secondary one. You've heard the stories. Amputations were performed without anesthetic, the patient held down by his crewmates, a leather strap in his mouth to bite down on to keep from screaming his lungs out or biting off his own tongue. The carpenter would work quickly. The sawbler, the stump then cauterized with a red-hot axe head from the galley or sealed with a coat of boiling tar. It was a brutal, terrifying procedure with a horrificously low survival rate due to shock and subsequent infection. For everyday ailments, there was no carpenter, only folk wisdom and desperate improvisation. You see it all around you. A man with a raging toothache, his face swollen to twice its normal size, doesn't go to a dentist. He goes to a fellow pirate who claims to know a cure. The cure involves packing the tooth's cavity with a wad of chewing tobacco mixed with gunpowder. The nicotine and sulfur provide a temporary numbing and antiseptic effect, but you can see the agony in the man's eyes. This is the world of Yidu Gongdu, or fighting fire with fire, in its most literal and dangerous form. Lacking proper medicine, sailors turned to whatever was at hand, creating a bizarre and often harmful pharmacopoeia. This is a fascinating area for medical historians who study the logbooks and journals of the period to understand these folk remedies. Many were useless, some were actively harmful, and a few, by sheer luck, had a small kernel of effectiveness. You watch as a man who has a deep, festering cut on his arm, the skin around it red and angry, treats it himself. He doesn't have antiseptic ointment. Instead, he takes a glob of the greasy, rancid slush skimmed from the top of the salt beef barrel-lace substance known as slush fund, which was oft unsold, and smears it over the wound. The theory, as far as you can understand it, is that the thick grease will create a barrier against the bad air that causes infection. He is packing a dirty wound with bacterial Aden fat, virtually guaranteeing a worse infection. Another common practice is bloodletting. A sailor feels feverish and ill, so a friend uses a knife to make a small incision in his arm, letting a cupful of bad blood drain out, believing it will carry the sickness away with it. This, of course, only weakens an already sick man. You are not immune. Your own gums are beginning to feel tender again. You remember the terror of the scurvy and feel a rising panic. An older sailor sees your worried expression and offers you a piece of advice. He tells you to chew on a piece of sailcloth soaked in vinegar. The acidity, he claims, will harden the gums. You are desperate enough to try it. You chew on the sour, musty piece of canvas until your jaw aches. It does nothing, of course, except make your mouth taste even more foul than usual. You are living in a world without science, a world governed by superstition, desperation, and rumor. Every ache, every pain is a potential death sentence. The lack of proper food is weakening your body, and the lack of proper medicine means there is no safety net to catch you when you fall ill. You look at the carpenter sharpening his saw, and a cold dread washes over you. The greatest horror of this life isn't the enemy's cannon or the hangman's noose. It's the slow, inexorable decay of your own body and the terrifying ignorant cures that are your only hope. The ship finally limps into a friendly port. It's not one of the grand, respectable cities of the world. It's a pirate haven, a place like Tortuga or a hidden cove in the backwaters of Nassau. It's a chaotic, ramshackle town clinging to the edge of the jungle, a place built entirely on plunder and vice. The air smells of cheap rum, roasting meat, unwashed bodies, and money. For the crew, it's paradise. The moment the ship is tied up at the rickety dock, the fragile order of life at sea disintegrates. The rules, the rations, the shared misery, it all dissolves. It's a mad dash for the shore, a frantic, Joyous exodus. You join the stream of pirates pouring into the town's single, muddy street. Your pockets are heavy with your share of the plunder from the Portuguese merchantmen, a mix of silver coins and a few small pieces of gold. You are, for the first time in your life, a man of means, and you have only one thing on your mind. You don't go to the tailor or the jeweler. You go straight to the nearest tavern. It's a loud, smoky, crowded place, filled with pirates from a dozen different ships, all shouting in a medley of languages. But your eyes are fixed on the bar. Behind it, you see things you have only dreamed of for months. Loaves of soft, fresh, baked bread, wheels of cheese, platters of roasted chicken, and barrels of real, honest-to-goodness beer and ale. You push your way to the front, slap a silver coin on the bar, a massive overpayment, and you don't even have to say a word. The tavern keeper understands the look in your eyes. He shoves a full loaf of bread, a hunk of cheese, and a frothing tankard of ale in front of you. You take the bread in both hands. It's soft. It yields to the pressure of your fingers. You tear off a huge piece and stuff it in your mouth. There are no weevils. There is no grit. It's just the pure, wonderful, glorious taste of bread. You almost weep with relief. You wash it down with a long pull of ale, the cool, malty liquid, a blessed relief after months of rum-laced slime. You feel like you could sit here and do this forever. This is the cycle of pirate life. Long periods of extreme deprivation at sea, punctuated by short, explosive bursts of wild indulgence on land. It's a feast or famine existence, and right now, it is a feast. You watch your crewmates. They are all doing the same, a look of pure primal satisfaction on their faces. They are not just eating and drinking, they are performing a ritual. They are aggressively, almost violently, reclaiming their humanity, one bite and one swallow at a time. Historians often describe these pirate ports as dens of sin and debauchery, and they were. But it's important to understand the psychology behind it. This wasn't just about hedonism. It was a reaction to the trauma of life at sea. A man who has been starving for months doesn't just want a meal, he wants a feast. A man who has been drinking foul water doesn't just want a drink, he wants to get roaring lie, forgetfully drunk. The excess was a way of purging the memory of the deprivation. For the next few days, you live in a blur of sensation. You eat until your stomach aches. You drink until you can't stand. You spend your money with a reckless abandon, knowing that it's all fleeting. The town is designed to separate a pirate from his money as quickly as possible, and you are a willing participant in the transaction. You see the whole spectrum of the pirate shore leave experience. Some men spend all their money in a few days of riotous living, undenned up, having to sign onto a new ship, completely broke, just to have a place to sleep in, something to eat. Others are more careful, perhaps trying to buy a small piece of land or set themselves up in a trade. But they are the minority. The prevailing ethos is to live for the moment. The popular pirate toast, a merry life and a short one, makes perfect sense here. But even in this paradise of excess, you can't fully escape the sea. You catch a glimpse of your own reflection in a dirty tavern window. You are still thin, your skin sallow, your eyes holding a haunted look that the ale can't quite wash away. You see your crewmates, and you notice the lingering signs of their ordeal, the missing teeth, the scarred skin, the slight limp that never quite went away. The port is a temporary reprieve, a colorful bandage on a deep wound. On the third day, your money is almost gone. The headache is permanent, and a familiar figure appears in the tavern, the quartermaster. HES here to recruit. The ship is being re-provisioned, and it will be ready to sail in a few days. HES going from tavern to tavern, gathering the crew, reminding them of their duty. And despite everything, despite the misery you know is waiting for you, you feel a strange pull. The land is chaotic and expensive, has a structure, a purpose, and it's the only life you know now. With a sigh, you finish your ale. It's almost time to go back. You stand on the deck, the familiar stench of the harbor, a mix of salt, fish, and sewage filling your nostrils. Your pockets are empty. Your head still aches from the shore-leave indulgences, and the ship is being loaded with new provisions for the next voyage. You watch as barrels of salt beef and crates of hardtack are hauled aboard. It's the same grim fare, the same promise of future misery. But this time, something is different. You are different. You look at your hands. They are calloused and strong. You run your tongue over your teeth. They are all still there, a victory in itself. You look at your reflection in a bucket of water. The face staring back at you is no longer the wide-eyed, naive boy who stepped on this ship months ago. It is the face of a survivor. It's leaner, harder, and there's a shadow in the eyes that was there before. But it's your face. The money from the prize is gone, spent on a few days of fleeting pleasure. But you've come away with something else, something far more valuable and far more permanent. The damage. The long months of malnutrition have left their mark on you, a debt your body will never fully repay. You feel it in your joints. There's a persistent ache, a stiffness in the mornings that was there before. This was a common complaint of sailors, often dismissed as rheumatism from the damp sea air. But modern medicine suggests it was likely a long-term consequence of chronic scurvy. The damage to the collagen in their connective tissues and joints was cumulative and often irreversible. You think about your teeth. They survived this time, thanks to the captured lemons. But you've seen the older sailors, men who have been at this for years. Many of them have gaps in their smiles, their teeth lost not to fights, but to the slow, relentless decay of scurvy. They eat with difficulty, mashing their food with their gums. It's a future you can now vividly imagine. The long-term health consequences for pirates and sailors of this era were devastating, a topic that medical historians find both fascinating and horrifying. The diet didn't just cause acute, life-threatening illnesses like scurvy and dysentery. It caused a lifetime of chronic problems. Digestive issues were rampant. A diet of incredibly salty meat and indigestible biscuit, washed down with corrosive rum and contaminated water, wreaked havoc on the stomach and intestines. Chronic gastritis, ulcers, and other painful conditions were likely the norm. The constant, low-level dehydration from the salty food and reliance on alcohol put immense strain on the kidneys. Liver damage from the excessive rum consumption was almost a given. These men were essentially pickling themselves from the inside out. You look at your crewmates as they board the ship, ready for the next voyage. You see the signs everywhere. The man with the persistent, hacking cough that never goes away. The older pirate whose hands tremble slightly, a sign of nerve damage from years of alcohol abuse and vitamin deficiencies. The sallow, yellowish tint to another man's skin, a telltale sign of a struggling liver. They may have a reputation as fearsome, larger-than-life figures, but in the harsh light of day, they are a collection of damaged, unhealthy men. Their plundered wealth, when they had it, could buy them fleeting moments of pleasure, but it couldn't buy them new teeth, a healthy liver, or joints that didn't ache. This is the great, tragic irony of the pirate's life. They risked everything for a treasure that couldn't fix what their lifestyle was breaking. The merry life was a frantic, desperate sprint. The short one was an almost medical certainty. There's an ongoing debate among historians about the average lifespan of a pirate. It's an incredibly difficult number to calculate. Many died violently, in battle or at the end of a rope. But it's widely believed that even for those who escaped a violent end, their life expectancy was drastically shortened by the sheer physical toll of their occupation. The diet was a slow-acting poison, as deadly as any cannonball. As the ship pulls away from the dock and points its bow towards the open sea, you don't feel the same naive excitement you felt on your first voyage. You don't feel the same terror you felt when the scurvy set in. What you feel is a cold, hard resignation. You have survived one round. You have stared into the abyss of starvation and disease, and you have, for now, climbed back out. You know the rules of the game now. You know the price of survival, and as you accept your first ration of the new voyage, a familiar, rock-hard biscuit, you understand that this life isn't an adventure. It's a war of attrition against your own body, and it's a war you are destined to lose. The rhythm of the sea reclaims you. The brief, chaotic interlude on land fades into memory, and the familiar, monotonous routine of the ship becomes your world once more. Days are measured not by a calendar, but by the changing of the watch and the doling out of rations. Your existence narrows, becoming a simple loop of work. Eat, sleep, repeat. And at the center of that loop, as always, is the food. You've come to a strange, uneasy truce with your diet. You no longer gag at the slimy water or the weevil Y biscuits. You chew the salt beef with a stoic, practiced determination. The revulsion has been replaced by a weary, functional acceptance. This is fuel. Its purpose is to keep you alive until the next prize ship, the next island, the next meal that tastes of something other than salt and decay. You think back on all the men you've seen come and go, even in your short time as a pirate. You remember the face of a young man who succumbed to a fever just a week out of port, his body racked with shivers before being unceremoniously stitched into a canvas shroud and slid over the side. You remember the hollowed-out eyes of the men in the grip of scurvy, their bodies literally falling apart. You remember the screams of a man whose leg was crushed by a loose cannon in a storm, the grim amputation that followed, and his death from infection 3 days later. And a stark realization dawns on you. The greatest threat in this life isn't the Royal Navy. It's not the gallows, not the Spanish, not even a hurricane. The most prolific killer on this ship, the most dangerous enemy you face every single day, is your own dinner plate. It's the invisible war being waged inside your own body, for every pirate who met a dramatic end in a blaze of glory. Swinging from a rope with a defiant curse on his lips, how many more simply wasted away in their hammocks? How many died quietly from dysentery? Their life seeping out of them in a bloody, agonizing flux. How many succumbed to the slow, internal rot of scurvy? Their last sensation, the looseness of their own teeth. How many died of food poisoning from eating a piece of spoiled meat or a toxic fish? Their deaths dismissed as just another fever. This is the unglamorous, unwritten history of piracy. The official records, the trial documents, the newspaper accounts, they all focus on the spectacular. They tell the stories of the great battles, the famous captains, the hangings at Execution Dock. But they don't record the slow, anonymous deaths from malnutrition and disease. This is a point that maritime historians and archaeologists constantly emphasize. The skeleton of a sailor found in an unmarked grave on a deserted island is far more likely to show the telltale signs of scurvy or chronic infection than the marks of a sword wound. The violence of pirate life was real, but it was sporadic. The threat of starvation and disease was constant. It was the background noise to their entire existence. The fear of the hangman's noose was a distant possibility, something that might happen at the end of a long and successful career. The fear of your gums bleeding was a daily, immediate reality. You look at the crew around you. They are a brotherhood of survivors. Every man still standing is a testament to a combination of luck, a strong constitution, and the hard-won knowledge of how to endure. They know how to clean a biscuit in the dark. They know how to mix their grog to kill the taste of the water. They know which desperate, unproven remedies to try when they feel sickness creeping in. They are all amateur experts in the science of their own slow decay. This shared experience has forged a bond deeper than any drunken celebration. You can see it in the way the old sailor wordlessly shares a bit of his tobacco with the man whose tooth is aching. You see it in the way a stronger crew mate will quietly take on a bit of a sick man's duties without being asked. They are all prisoners on the same floating raft, then they understand that their only hope is to rely on each other. The romantic image of the pirate is one of a fearless daredevil, laughing in the face of death. But as you look at the weary, scarred faces around you, it's not the courage of the battlefield. It's the quiet, stubborn courage of endurance. It's the courage to wake up every morning, knowing the misery that awaits you, and to face it anyway. It's the courage to swallow another mouthful of poison, just to stay alive for one more day. You are old now. Or at least you feel old. The years at sea have blurred together, a long montage of empty horizons and fleeting, violent encounters. Your body is a roadmap of your life. The scar on your forearm from a Spanish cutlass. The faint pockmarks on your shins that are the ghosts of a long-ago bout with scurvy. The ache in your back that is as constant as the tides. You've survived. You are one of the lucky ones. You didn't end up on the gallows or at the bottom of the sea. You've managed to hoard a small share of plunder, enough to leave the life behind. You find yourself in a quiet tavern in a semi-respectable port town, a place where they don't ask too many questions if your coins are good. You have a real bed to sleep in, a roof over your head that doesn't leak, and food that doesn't crawl. It's everything you ever dreamed of during those long, miserable nights at sea. But it's not the paradise you imagined. You sit down for your evening meal. The tavern keeper places a plate in front of you. It's a simple meal, a piece of roasted chicken, a scoop of mashed potatoes, and a thick slice of fresh bread with butter. It's a feast beyond the wildest dreams of your younger self. You pick up your fork, but you hesitate. You stare at the plate. Then you think about what a last meal truly means for a pirate. The romantic notion is a grand, defiant feast. A whole roasted pig, bottles of the finest wine, a final glorious indulgence before facing the hangman. It's a scene played out in countless stories. The condemned pirate, laughing and feasting, showing the world he has no regrets. Some historical accounts do suggest that condemned prisoners were sometimes granted a final meal request, and a man with a pocketful of gold might well have paid for such a spectacle. But for the vast, overwhelming majority of pirates, their last meal was not a choice. It was not a feast. It was a mundane, miserable continuation of their daily reality. You close your eyes and you can picture it with perfect clarity. A man weakened by a fever he contracted from a mosquito bite on some swampy island lies in his hammock. He is too weak to get up. A crewmate, out of a sense of pity, brings him his ration. It's a piece of hardtack, softened in a cup of grog. The sick man tries to spoon the gritty sludge into his mouth, but he is too weak. He spills most of it on his chest. He manages a few swallows before lapsing back into unconsciousness. He dies later that night. His last meal was a mouthful of weevil white paste. You imagine another man, this one on a ship that has been becalmed for weeks. The food has run out. The crew has resorted to the final, desperate measures. They have boiled and eaten the leather from their own shoes. His last meal is a strip of boiled leather, tough and flavorless, that gives him the illusion of fullness but provides no nourishment. He dies of starvation a day later. Then you think of the most common end of all, Eamon on a typical voyage, not in any immediate crisis. He feels the familiar ache in his gums, the profound weariness in his limbs. He eats his daily ration of salt beef and biscuit, forcing it down, knowing it's both keeping him alive and failing to provide what he truly needs. He goes to sleep and simply doesn't wake up, his body finally giving up the fight. His last meal was the same miserable, inadequate fare he'd been eating for months. There was no drama, no ceremony, just a quiet, anonymous end. This is the great, unsexy truth that modern historical analysis, focusing on diet and health, has brought to light. The final meal of the average pirate wasn't a banquet. It was, in all likelihood, one last, disappointing bite of the very food that was killing him. The question of what a pirate's last supper looked like is still debated, simply because the mundane deaths were so rarely recorded, but the logical conclusion, based on what we know of their diet and mortality rates, points not to a feast, but to a final, pathetic mouthful of survival rations. You open your eyes and look at the plate of chicken and potatoes in front of you. The food is real. The threat is gone. You have made it. But the ghosts of all those other last meals, the ones that weren't recorded in any history book, sit with you at the table. You pick up your fork and take a bite. It tastes good. but it also tastes of survival, and it's a flavor you know you will carry with you for the rest of your days. The glow from the tavern's hearth is warm, casting long, soft shadows that dance on the wooden walls. The low murmur of conversation around you is a comforting hum, a sound of ordinary life that feels like the greatest of luxuries. You take another bite of the chicken, chewing it slowly, deliberately. Each bite is a conscious act, a quiet defiance of your past. You are no longer just consuming fuel, you are tasting your freedom. The memories of the sea, of the hunger and the fear, are not gone. They are a part of you now, like the scars on your skin. They are the phantom making your joints on a damp morning, the instinctive glance you give a piece of bread to check for tunnels, the slight cringe at the taste of anything too salty. But here, in the warmth and the light, they are just ghosts. Their power to harm you is gone. You are the one who survived to tell the tale, even if only to yourself. You are the one who gets to eat the chicken. The life of a pirate, you reflect, was a desperate gamble. A wager made against impossible odds, not for gold or for glory, but for this. For the simple, profound privilege of a decent meal and a quiet night. Most of the men you knew lost that wager, their bodies broken by the daily grind of survival. You finish your meal, savoring the last bite. You push the empty plate away and lean back in your chair, a feeling of deep, bone-weary peace settling over you. The noise of the tavern seems to fade into a gentle, distant hum. The flickering firelight blurs, its edges softening. It feels as though the world is gently rocking, a familiar motion, but this time it is not the threatening roll of the sea, but something far more soothing. It's the gentle sway of a world finally at rest. Exhausting voyage is over. You have made it to your final harbor. Your eyelids feel heavy. The warmth of the fire, the fullness of your belly, the profound relief of safety. It's a lullaby more powerful than any you have ever known. You are home. You are safe. You are safe. You are safe. You are, at long last, at peace. The ghosts of the sea can treat you here